Welcome everyone to the virtual world of the Eastside Freedom Library, where we more or less make the trains run on time, especially if Washington provides us with the infrastructure. This is a very special evening. Our dear friend Mary Moore Easter is joining us to share with us her new book, Free Papers, inspired by the testimony of Eliza Winston, a Mississippi slave escaped to freedom in Minnesota in 1860. We are all about storytelling in different forms here at the Eastside Freedom Library, and so it's exciting to have this story being told in a poetic form. Mary is the author of other collections of poetry, The Body of the World, which was a Minnesota Book Award and Poetry Finalist in 2019, Walking from Origins from the Flutes of Our Bones, published in 2020, and now Free Papers. Mary is a Pushcart Prize-nominated poet, a Cave Canem Fellow, a veteran dancer and choreographer, and an emerita professor of dance at Carleton College. She's also the mother of 2 daughters and 4 grandchildren. As we were preparing for tonight, I came across a wonderful appreciation of Mary's work by the brilliant young poet Danez Smith, who wrote about this book. Mary Moore Easter's Free Papers is dreaming in the archives through poems that document and redocument the life of Eliza Winston, paired beside poems that reach across time to unite Black women in their quest to rapture the self from the prisons of nation and whiteness. Easter has built a hall of mirrors where one can come out of the other side free, transformed. Here documents morph like a mind suddenly free from its last shackle. The poetry, freedom's promise, knows no bounds. And as a special treat this evening for the poem Winslow House, a script for 3 voices, Mary will be joined by her daughter Allison Easter, who's joining us from New York, and Siddiqa Shabazz, who is joining us from here in the Twin Cities. Both are significant performance artists in their own right. So this is really a very special treat this evening. The plan is that Mary will read, then she'll be joined by Siddiqa and Allison, then she'll read a little bit more, and then we will open up, invite you to make yourselves visible and unmute yourselves and make comments and ask questions. So if you have concerns, please use the chat. I will be following that and will respond. So I'm gonna make myself invisible and turn this over to Mary.
Anna Mowry was born a slave. My great-grandmother. Eliza Winston was born a slave. In Free Papers, she tells you who she is. In this poem, every line culls from her testimony. I titled it Character Witness for Herself. I married a free man of color. My husband and myself worked hard. I have always been faithful, and no master that I have ever had has found fault with me. I thought I had a right to my clothes because they did not come from my master or mistress. I minded her. I told him I was not going to do wrong. I have always been faithful to him and done my best to please him and my mistress. I have been closely confined. I have never fretted or complained because I thought if I did my very best, they would perhaps give me my freedom. I would not marry anyone but a free person. I could go back to Memphis where I could get employment as a nurse girl and could earn from $10 to $15 a month. I am sorry I must sacrifice so much. I am ready to make the sacrifice. I prefer freedom. Eliza had friends who kept the secret of her escape plans. They tried to imagine the weather in Minnesota while they made her wardrobe. Those who made 2 years' worth of her clothes tell about it. First woman. He'd tell the land would be white in winter. He'd tell the white would be soft as cotton with thorns of ice, not growing from the ground, but falling from the sky. He'd tell what she gonna need for a body used to heat. I make a secret round my waist of mistress ripped pantaloons, stolen honey cover, smuggled down the slave line, ripped at will. She won't miss its rent unmended. Plenty more where that come from. Second woman. As long as these old fingers hold a thimble, you will not tremble in whatever cold they have for you, Eliza. You are not motherless without cover in your solitude. Take with you this vest with sleeves, stitched and doubled, cotton stuffed. These skirts and sack shirts closed with pilfered buttons, tagged with bits of cut off ribbon to remind your joy to rise inside your obedient face, your fire to blaze inside whatever cold they have for you. Take us with you in each fold and pleat, armored by the freedom that you seek. Another man done gone. Up the river, way up from Shiloh Plantation, Mississippi to St. Anthony Falls, Minnesota. In droves they came. They left the heat behind, the Mississippi musk and heavy air. A change of scene would do them good, the falls and water rushing free in foam. They took their comforts with them. Cook, who kept the South inside their mouths. Slave, who'd sleep on floor outside their door, waked at any whim or need. The hand that held the sickly head and kept the children out of mind, that hefted, smooth, and scurried, dark as nighttime in the day, invisible, and nothing to imagine with a plan. Eliza came, was brought along to hold the sickly head. She left the bondage of her home behind, left friends who knew her leaving was for good, and kept her plan for freedom sealed. Left musk and heavy air and duties owned by those whose promises betrayed her trust. She did her very best, a comfort to herself, her standards steady over churning water, her forward motion out of sight beneath the flashing surface of the paddle boat. She smoothed and scurried, closely confined by minutes, hours, days, nights, waiting to alight on land, free land. Eliza keeps the secret of her escape. Through several days' water travel, not free yet, through overland transport from St. Paul's lower landing, not free yet, not free yet, she arrives with her master's family at the famed luxury of Winslow House on Main Street, overlooking the falls. Her inner reflections, voiced tonight by guest Allison Easter, raise the participation of the poet herself, read by me, and my own grandmother Moore, voiced by guest Siddiqa Shabazz. Winslow House in St. Anthony, a script for 3 voices.
Eliza, Winslow House, the big house in the north, 5 stories tall, curved banisters, silk drapes. Nothing new to me, except the soil it sets on is free soil, not the slave dirt of the Delta, holding the bones of a stranger who looked a side-eye me once. My mother, then quick, drew her gaze back to the hoe, whip bent and staring down that handle into her grave. Winslow House, masters and slaves on every floor, mistresses and the maids they owned to dress them.
My grandmother was a maid and nanny.
Grandmother Moore, I was never owned. I served for good pay.
I had a house once.
Me too, Eliza, me too.
And a lot we invested our savings in. This house was rented for $8 per month.
A little cottage, seaside, mine.
I was 4, Grandma. The sea there on my ankles.
I had a husband once.
Me too, Eliza, twice.
Man with a plan to buy me free.
Mine was never owned either. He served for good pay, driving that big car far away.
Man with a view from the big world.
I wanted to walk in the big world.
Hush, you two. It's my story to tell. Go away. To the world in our house, 2 backs bent to the work, bent to the laws that gave master the holding, along with a promise he never could keep. Death, you know, kept the secret of his failure. Jim. They called my husband Jim. I said, my choice.
My son, Jim.
Jim, my father.
I said, hush. Jim was free. Master took his money for my labor. A man used to traveling, my husband, by request, went with a company of emancipated slaves to Liberia and was to stay 2 years. $8 per month by 1 year is $96. $8 per month by 2 years amounts to $192 of my labor earned towards my freedom. My husband died in Liberia, and I was pawned to pay my master's debts, but never sold free. Death kept the measure of his failure. I have never received 1 cent from my property at Memphis since my husband died. A free man with a house we would own.
We would own.
never stayed at Winslow House. Slaves and masters on every floor.
Thank you to my guests who, during quarantine conditions, made possible the first time reading of this poem. So thank you, daughter Allison, Easter reading from New York, and friend Sadiqa Shabazz reading from St. Paul. Thanks to Director Ruth Weiner for your help. Thanks to all of Eastside Freedom Library, to Clarence White, to Peter Rockcliffe, to Beth Cleary, and any other helpers they have around. I really appreciate this opportunity. I am going to resist the desire to read you the whole book tonight, right? And we're coming up on questions and comments, which I really hope that you will engage in discussion with me. Before we do that, I'm going to read one more poem. I'll introduce it by saying that the abolitionists protecting Eliza took her case to court so she could not be reclaimed into slavery. She wasn't prepared to meet a mob. Eliza didn't expect roses and sunshine. Where in her life had there ever been roses? Still, she wasn't prepared to meet a mob at the threshold of the courtroom. Place of triumph, free to walk into arms raised against her. Shouts bursting above an angry murmur, malign intent simmering in the air. Her guardians grasped her arms, hustled her to a carriage. She gasped in the gallop of hooves, away to a big house, away to clamor at the door, crowd gathering outside. In the simmer, she stood free in the stairwell. When they battered the door, she stood free as the lady of the house leveled her pistol and fired a shot that backed them away. All night, the mob would not have it, this freedom that damaged their purses. Resistance lurked in the air. Protectors whisked her farther away under a cloak, in a disguise. Fear rattling her free chest, steady pulse to sustain her. How far away was freedom and rest? Thank you so much for your kind attention. It is wonderful having all of these slates in front of me that attest to your presence. I certainly hope you will talk with us. I'm ready for questions. Unmute yourselves and let me know.
Thank you for a wonderful evening, Mary. It was delightful to share this with you, to see your daughter, to hear that fantastic reading from your daughter and her friend with you. You know I love your poetry. I'm one of your great fans. So thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. May I introduce you to the people who may not know you. Daryl Danez is a childhood friend of mine, but she is a distinguished genealogist and writer with a list of books to her credit. And I am so delighted that she is here tonight. Thank you, Daryl.
And thank you.
That's great. Yeah.
So Mimi Jennings had her mechanical hand up first.
Okay.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you? It works. I want to say that it's like a double triumph because it's not just it's not just getting the story out. It's not just Mary's words and work that's bringing it to us, but it's, and Mary, can you tell me how much, to what extent? It's Eliza's own words. That's what's so moving to me.
Well, a lot of it is taken directly from her words. And then some of it is her words stimulated me so much. I mean, I read that testimony, which is 3 pages, 3 typewritten pages long. I read it over and over and over again, and I'd come to some new understanding every time, sometimes sort of late You know, the part about the women making her clothes. I must have read it 4 times before I thought, oh my God, she had friends. She had friends. She was not just a slave there by herself. She had friends. And guess what? They didn't tell on her. You know, they made the clothes. How long does it take to hand sew a wardrobe that is 2 years worth of clothes? So they worked on it for some time and they kept that secret for her. Well, that was a very enlivening moment to discover that that's actually included in the testimony. If you read it enough times, you will suddenly realize that that's what happened. At the beginning of the book, there's an excerpted part of her testimony so that certain things will follow along as you read the poems. And then at the end, there's the complete testimony. So you can go back and sort of check up on me, you know, reference back and forth. Does that begin to answer your question, Mimi?
Yeah, it begins. There's so much, I mean, it just hats off. There's so much wonderful work here that, you know, that it's your work as a poet, it's her work to get herself free, and it's everything that in between.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Eric Flam has his hand up.
Oh my goodness.
Mary, it's really great to see you, and I was so pleased to get this book. My question is there more to the writer's story about how you found this material, or what attracted you to write about this, to make poems about this?
What a great question. First of all, thank you so much. Eric is calling from Oregon, where he is also a writer, and he is, okay, I'm not going to give everybody's bio. But yeah, my discovery of Eliza felt like a little bit of a miracle to me. I had seen the plaque by the river, by the Mississippi in downtown Minneapolis that honors her, and it tells a little bit of her story. And I had always sort of asterisked it as something that I would be interested in, that I should do more research. But some years went by, and one day I went to the African American Museum here in Minneapolis, in North Minneapolis, just because I had been meaning to go there and I hadn't gone there. And when I got there, it was one room, and it had some nice presentations, but it seemed like I was not going to spend an afternoon there until I looked up on the wall, and there was the testimony of Eliza Winston. I didn't even know it existed. And it literally felt like it fell in my lap. And I felt so, I mean, I just looked up and said, thank you. Because it was the answer to a prayer I hadn't prayed, you know. And the material, I have done a lot of ancestry work with about my family. But this would give me a chance to use, to use the kind of experience I had with my family, but to investigate someone else. So it was not, I had to find out who she was, how she was. And what I had was her actual words. It was like she was speaking to me, reading that testimony. And what struck me first of all is she had a good grasp of telling a story. She just stood there in front of the judge. She could not write because she signed it with her ex, and she told the complicatedness of the story. Raised by Mr. Goldson, and then serving with Mr. Golson's son-in-law's daughter. She went on through it. The plans that she made with her husband, the fact that he died, and that was the end of a lot of planning that they had. And then she had to think of another way. So all of that, it was very, very striking to me, and I was just bent on doing it. I mean, I could not put it down. I thought this is an opportunity that has been handed me, and I'm not gonna let it slip. So that's a partial answer. I say in a poem near the beginning of the book that I feel anointed by the discovery of you, Eliza. And I did, that was not too strong a statement. I did feel I had been given something that I had to live up to, had to involve myself totally. I am seeing a person turning the pages who was my mentor and guide through this whole process. And I'm just gonna call on you, Margie, even though you haven't raised your hand, to say anything about how this is going that you would like.
Oh, Mary, it's just going splendidly. It's such a beautiful book. And when you said you looked up and said thank you, you kind of had, I have the feeling that Eliza Winston is looking down and saying thank you to you for giving her voice a larger, and a new audience at this point. And I think it just feels so good in the hand. Was there something else that I should say about it?
No, thank you so much, Margie. I just, I could see you right there, and I wanted to acknowledge you. I've acknowledged you in the book itself, so people read the notes and the personal thanks, all of that. Yeah, for all of your help. Such discussions we had. I mean,
yes, we did, and you were so. You just inhabited it, and I could tell once you found her, as you just said a moment ago, you were seized by her. It seems as if the poems tumbled out of you. How long was the period of time between your encounter with the idea of her and writing with her words to the having a full manuscript? Do you remember?
It was about 9 or 10 months, and there was some rushing at the end because there was a particular contest I wanted to submit it to. And, it's a chapbook. And as you may know, there are publishers seeking full-length manuscripts, and you have to choose very carefully if you're writing a chapbook, a smaller book. You got to find a publisher who is seeking that kind of manuscript. So it was a very intense 9 or 10 months, and I missed it when it was done. This was get up in the middle of the night and see if you can find out something on the computer about slave clothing. That's the kind of experience that it was.
You knew you were onto something big with it too, with 2 writing groups that you're in, I believe you're in 2. And they were both saying, yes, Mary, kind of standing by and back and saying, just these are really working. And every time you brought one in, I think you really galvanized the group when they heard the new work.
Well, thank you for spouting out praises to me on demand, okay? Anybody else?
We got Ben Mackay patiently.
Oh, Ben, okay. Hello.
Hello, Mary, how are you?
I am just fine. How are you with your
well.
African American Archive? Yeah.
Yes, that and more, and finally getting a chance to see your daughter and hear Miss Shabazz, it made me think of your mother.
Oh my goodness.
And with that, I would ask you, where does the nurturing, besides the DNA, that speaks for itself, but where does the nurturing of your mother come into play for either choices for the book or style in how you wrote it, if any?
Well, my mother's research and her inspiration were from the African American past. And in music, she's, my mother is a composer, a classical composer, and she is, I think, best known for her settings of spirituals, choral settings of spirituals, but she composed for all the instruments, and she has left us with over 100 compositions that are played. I mean, I get royalty checks from Japan, so she died 30 years ago, and her work is very much alive. And And I should advertise a minute that we just got the printed copy of a second organ piece to the hymn melody, There Is a Fountain. All right, so that just got published. So with that background, I'm looking because there's another student of my mother's. Daryl Dance was a student of my mother's, and then there's James Ballard, who's also here, was a student of my mother's. It's sort of like calling in the groups. What was the nurturing? Well, it was everywhere. I mean, she was involved. Music was that great art for her. And she talked about it all the time. She taught, and I was a part of that. The whole family was a part of that. And I will say that the nurture, I was originally trained as a musician. When I switched to dance, there was no difficulty with that. She used to decry that. She would say things like, "Oh, well, you have so much invested in music, you know?" And I would say, "Well, yes, I do, but I'm going to do this different thing now, you know?" And it went on like that. And as I danced and choreographed and got more and more involved in it, concurrently, I was interested in writing. And I had this feeling that when dance would finally leave me, it kept hanging on and hanging on. I was glad of that. But when it would finally leave me, I didn't want to be at the beginning of the next sense of artistic expression. I didn't want to be just left flat and starting over. So I was writing, and I was in writing groups, and I took opportunities to go to master classes, to seek out opportunities to study. I really wanted to study. Eventually that led to Canem, the Foundation for African American Poetry, which was a great honor to be accepted there. And then, boy, was that turning my head around, to be with so many. I remember writing even in the application that looking at their website gave me a completely different idea about the number of African American poets, young and living, that there were. I thought I knew something. And I looked at all these people and I thought, isn't this something? A movement is going on that I don't really know about, but I want to be a part of it. So those are some of the ways that my writing was nurtured. And a lot of it has to do with my mother and her research. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Benjamin.
So, Mary, if I could ask a question.
Yes, indeed.
We're surrounded by great writers and performance artists in our midst tonight. I want to speak up for my craft, the historian's craft. Mm-hmm. And part of what I love about your work is that you did research to inform it. Mm-hmm. But I also want to send a shout out to Bill Green, who has written a book about Eliza Winston.
Oh my God, his book was so incredible, and I owe so many thanks to him. Eliza Winston and the Politics of Race in Minnesota from 1850 to 1860, is the name of his work, where he explored the effect of Eliza. Her freedom caused quite an upheaval in Minnesota. And despite the fact that Minnesota's new constitution, 3-4 years old at the time that she came here, said that there would be no slavery in Minnesota. The populace was not in favor of this. That's why after the courtyard, there was a mob, literally a mob of people who were against it. And her freedom suggested great economic changes for the state and for the people. And on top of that, there was an argument going on. There would be newspaper articles, op-ed pieces that said, what is this argument? Is it your purse or your principles that you stand by? Sort of outing the people who were in favor of the new Constitution, but were really mad that Southerners were not going to keep coming up the Mississippi and with a whole retinue of slaves and staying for 2 or 3 months. One of the outcomes of that whole argument, well, how shall I say this shortly? You will know more about this, Peter, but this was, she came in August of 1860. And in the spring of 1861, the first shots were fired in the Civil War. So the issue was huge. It was a national issue. It was not just a Minnesota issue. The country was about to split and kill each other for 4 years over this issue. Mm-hmm. And Eliza Winston was a kind of chink. Was she a chink in the wall, or was she an omen about what was going to happen? I guess it depends on what you were in favor of, is whether she had that, was having a positive effect or a negative effect. But that, the rampaging of argument went on for some time before things calmed down. Yeah. So
we were fortunate here to have Professor Green in conversation with Professor Chris Lehman from St. Cloud State University, whose book Slavery's Reach documents the influence of slaveholders and their money here in Minnesota. And interestingly, right here on the east side of St. Paul, where he asked the question, why is there a street named Magnolia here on the east side of St. Paul? And in fact, it was named by a Southern slaveholder who would come in the summer to escape the heat and humidity and bring his enslaved men and women with him. So Minnesota is much more connected than some of us would like to think. Ben, I'm sorry, what were you saying?
No, he brought his money too.
And his money too, yeah. My cousin David, who has joined us from San Francisco. Oh. David, please.
Sorry about that. Apologies. I just wanted to tell you I'm Peter's cousin, and I really enjoyed the reading and the poem, and thank you so much. I just wanted to tell you that. So.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. This is just great. Speaking of relatives, I noticed that I have my daughter Mallory is here. My grandson Mason is here. Let me see. And others, yes. Well, I don't know what's happened to their screens, but it is wonderful to have their support. You know, that family, was it a year ago Christmas, I asked them if we could read the whole book together. And what we did is everybody just took a page. When you turn the page, it would be the next person, just so we could hear it all aloud. And it was a very wonderful experience to, first of all, to share my work in that depth with 2 generations, you know. Okay, I'm getting messages that are people, their batteries are running down and they're letting me know that they're leaving. I think these are maybe the grandchildren. So chat is a great thing. So we had a reading. We put aside an evening and we went through the whole thing. And it was an incredible gift to me. It really was. So I thank them, and I thank them for showing up tonight. Yeah, it's great.
Mary, Marcus's hand is up.
Yes, Marcus.
Okay. Marcus's hand is up. Okay. Marcus is tuned in from London. Okay. So how do I do this?
Wow.
Can I hear you, Marcus?
Yeah, I'm here. I hope you can hear me.
Okay. Well, great. What's up?
I was just announcing my presence when you said that your family was present. I'm present.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for letting us see you. It's just great. Wonderful. And then there's, that's really just incredible. Okay, so Marcus and Mason are here. And there's Mallory has turned on her camera. She's waving.
Yeah, I also just wanted to say thank you for reading. You and Allison, I think that was amazing seeing you guys sort of work together to.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Fantastic. Thank you so much from far, far away. I mean, you know, as much as we complain about the technology and we're trying to handle it, these are remarkable things that happen. It's really quite remarkable. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, somebody.
Carolyn Holbrook.
Carolyn.
There.
Where'd you go? Okay, there you are.
Here. I don't know how many people in the audience know about the other two books that you've recently published. So I would just love to hear you talk about your other books as well.
Yes, well, from the Flutes of Our Bones is a full-length collection, and it's from Nodin Press here in town. And I mean, I'm incredibly fortunate. This is all in 1 year. And who knew that would ever happen, but it did happen. And that book is, it is not focused on one person and one set of circumstances in the way that Eliza is. So it was possible to work on the two of them without, well, they were never confused. So that book has 4 sections, and I'm thinking I have a copy right here, but maybe it's in the other room. At any rate, it's sections called Messenger, which has to do, poems that have to do with what I want to say or what comes out of my family or my knowledge, and poems to send to other people, to send out into the world. Messenger. There is Fire, which is a bunch of angry political poems and sometimes very personal, might as well say it, divorce poems in there, okay? And then there's Marrow. So the poems come out of a sense of being extremely close to my body, myself, my world. But that will give you some idea about it. And the cover of that book is pictures of my parents. Let's see, the people pictured on that book are my parents, my mother's mother and father, and my father's mother, and me and my 2 girls. So they made a collage of that. My focus has been completely on free papers, because that book did come out a little bit earlier, and it's sort of had its, not its last moment, but its center of attention. Yeah, so I'm into free papers now, and I'm going to, yeah, I actually, okay. What else did you have in mind, Carolyn? This is from the Flutes of Our Bones, the music and the stories from the marrow of us, okay? And then this is free papers, okay? So thank you for asking me about them. That's great. I hope you will, I hope many of you will order them and read them. I love reading it to you. And I do think there's something about the live voice, you know, that is an additional thing. That is what I hope anyway.
Indeed, indeed. Beth had a question.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mary, so much. And this question actually brings us back into, yes, your live voice, but also the way that you you render the live voice in what you've read tonight, the not yet free, not yet free, the way that the documents speak through what you're calling free papers, and also the documents speak through history to our own moment. And so papers, free papers, seems to refer to both historical documents and dreams and voices. I mean, these incredible repetitions, the anaphora in that one piece that you read to do with not yet free, at the threshold, at these very, these different moments that were critical, but where she couldn't count yet on what was happening to her. And so I realized that my question is just a collection of impressions and praises of what you read tonight. But I wonder if, you know, this strikes you to do with the historical documents, which are technically inert, of course, but never, but also the ways that our own moments are also about free papers and dreams of not yet free.
Yes. Well, it resonates very strongly for me. I thank you for pointing that out. You know, free papers is, it could have been named manumission papers. There are other formal names for this, but this is what she kept calling it. She wanted her free papers, the papers that would prove that she was free. And, you know, you think about all the people at the border. I mean, it's not possible to be writing about her desire and her pursuit of this freedom and the representation of the freedom without thinking of all the people right now who are trying to get that. That's what they're trying to get. The paper that will allow them to move on with their lives, that will relieve them from the terrible situations that they are caught in. And one of the, I don't want to make a political speech, but I'll say one of the things that is so frustrating about the counter arguments to immigration is that there seems to be no sympathy or even understanding what people are fleeing, what people are fleeing. You know, they don't just want to get in here and take your stuff. They want to get away from something. They want to survive. They want to get away from starvation and violence and all of those things. So I'm hoping that's what you mean. And the name Free Papers, I discussed Free Papers with Margaret Hassey a lot. We talked about it, and that the title not only is what Eliza said, but that it could have other resonances. Yeah. So
Thank you.
Beautiful, thank you.
Thank you. Kathy McQuarrie, you have a question.
Oh my God. I've been looking right at Kathy McQuarrie. Kathy McQuarrie was my roommate at Sarah Lawrence, many other things, but this
Amen. Amen, Mary.
Yes.
Listen, I just have a comment to make, which is you are the most blindingly talented human being I have ever run across. In college, Mary had the most gorgeous singing voice, some of which you could hear tonight, and also was a marvelous piano player, pianist. She went to Paris to study with Nadia Boulanger. She really, and then danced her way through the major part of her life, and then became this incredibly talented writer. Whenever I get notices from Mary about what she's doing, I just don't know anybody else who has had such a life of creativity as you have had. It's astonishing, just astonishing.
I thank you, Kathy. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's such a pleasure to be here and hear this, Mary.
I appreciate your presence. I'm feeling like, you know, does it look like I paid these people? You know, it is very wonderful. Thank you for sharing your work. Thank you so much. I'm glad you could be. Yeah. All right. Who else should I call out?
If I'm going to jump in and call out Jean Ann Doratus, who I haven't seen in way too long, and she's clearly figured out the technology of Zoom, and here she is. You want to say something, Jean?
Everybody, I'm just kind of overwhelmed by the strength of Eliza, who needed to be free as we all have, but also, Mary, the strength that you put into that, and the devotion and the understanding and the need to deal with your own feelings of freedom, I think was just extremely powerful.
Thank you. Thank you, Canem.
Very emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is great. Thank you very much, Canem. You've seen a lot of this. I'm looking, oh, there's a hand.
Daryl wants in again. Please,
Yes.
Daryl.
I just wanted to go back to the moment you were saying something about immigration and the responses of people who show no sympathy or empathy. And I want to add to that the responses of people who seem to have no memory. And to some degree, memory is what this is all about tonight, I think. And memory, especially when we come to the issue you were talking about with immigration, because of course, some of those who are the most vehement opponents of immigration are just second generation Americans.
Yeah.
There must be, there had to be some memory. That's what I wanted to say. And thank you for bringing me back on.
That's great.
There have been some questions in the chat about how can people who don't yet have the book get the book.
Okay.
Clarence has just put in the chat the web address for Subtext Books, a great local independent bookstore that supports many of the readings that we've done. Mary, do you want to say anything else about how people can get a hold of the book or the other books as well that you've recently written?
Yes. Well, yes, Nodin Press has a link from the Flutes of Our Bones. And these are all, if you look up the title, you Google the title, you will find a link. Mary Moore Easter, you will find those books, all right. And Finishing Line Press is the publisher for Free Papers. They seem to be doing well and getting them out now. I received my copies 2 days ago, and I was very grateful to all of you who received copies and took pictures of them and sent them to me. And I thought, well, maybe one day I will have one too. So, so I think they've really got it rolling now. So, and I see Subtext Books is where you can get it in town, okay, if you want to do that. Oh, somebody else has mentioned something that I would like to mention because we're coming to the end of an hour. I was the editor of a chapbook called Can't Stop, Won't Stop, 9 Black Minnesota poets speaking out on social upheaval. And certainly the event and the results of the murder of George Floyd. And that is produced by Rain Taxi, the organization, the Rain Taxi Review of Books. Rain Taxi does a few more things also. But that was the platform on which I got to select and edit the poems I recommended to you. And that is also available. You Google Rain Taxi or protest, and you will find that book as well. Okay, so I think I'm reading the chat. That's unusual to have enough time. I'm gonna save the chat right now. That's possible. Save chat. Then I can read you all later. Yeah. Well, does anybody have a pressing comment to keep this going?
I'd love to hear you read one of your more recent poems before you hang up.
Thank you, Carolyn. More recent, you mean not in either of these books?
Correct, because you're always writing, so you've got a ton of new work, always.
I have some new work. It is not here on the dining room table. I will just tell you that. I'm trying to think if I can pull up something quickly. You know what? I don't think I can handle the technology. I thank you for asking, but
I have a question if you have time. I'm
I
just
do.
wondering. Hi, I just wondered, how does it feel to have your daughter
read with me?
Yeah, perform your ancestor. At the end of it, I just saw such joy in your face and Miss Shabazz's face, but I just wondered how you felt at the end of it.
I felt really great. I mean, Allison is doing a great job with Eliza, and Sadiqa, who obviously is generations younger than me, is doing a great job playing my grandmother. I mean, yeah, I felt, you know, she asked me some questions about my grandmother as we were preparing, and you know, it's like I brought these people out of their lives to read a very short amount of work, but they both have such gifts for embracing the word and showing it. So I had no feeling that it was weird, you know. As soon as she started reading, I thought, this is gonna work out. This is gonna work out. And plus, I'm old enough that if we have to get somebody that actually looks like my grandmother, they have to be about 120 years old. So I very much need to call on the younger generations. Thank you, Christy, for that.
It was so nice to see you all interacting. It was wonderful.
Oh,
Wonderful response to each other.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Very exciting evening.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Well, thank you. And Mary, I think that you've really demonstrated how we can build community through this weird technology, that so many people have come together tonight with so many different pieces of the stories that we need to hear. And you've galvanized this. And thank you so much for bringing your work to us. And it's just great to have you and great to have everyone with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you. Great to have you. I mean, I'm seeing people whose names I haven't called, but I guess Mary Ellen is here, okay? And over and over, yeah, dancers I know, other poets I know. It's really, it's a fantastic thing. Thank you so much. I even see a couple of names I don't know. How about that?
It's like Colleen Callahan wants to say something. Please,
yes.
Colleen.
Okay.
I actually unraised my hand, but I'll say I'll say fabulous, and it's so exciting to see your family here too. If you had to do we have till 8:30 or is this only till 8? I'll ask a question.
Ask a question.
Okay.
Let's see. You know,
I know you said a couple things that you were surprised at when you started researching Eliza. Is there anything else you'd add to this? If you were adding something more to the book, is there anything else that you wonder about or you wish were there?
Well, yes, I almost hate to expose that. I mean, I thought when I started this that I was going to look up her husband, Jim Winston. I thought, I'm going to find him. He was a free person. There's going to be some record of him where there's no record of slaves, you know, and that is the whole, that is a huge thing about slavery, that enslaved persons were not civically persons. So there's a poem about that in the book, actually. But I thought him I can find, and I managed to find that in Memphis at that period. It was a huge center of the Freedmen's Bureau. And I thought, I'm gonna get this, you know. First of all, I was going to go to Memphis. I had been invited by a church there, and a church that had discovered at its 150th anniversary that one of the walls of the church, it shared a wall with the slave trading store. All right.
Whoa.
And so I was just going to go down there and I'm going to find this guy, right? And that that it's in her testimony that he went to Liberia. So, okay, he's singled out. There's got to be some record of him. So I never found that. And the quarantine is one thing that set it down. And I'm not a professional genealogist like Daryl and others. I am just poking around on the computer and looking at other people's books and stuff like that. But I would have been interested in knowing more about him. And I have imagined how they met and gradually came to be attached to each other. And the attachment, seems to me, was profound. You can't figure out how to buy somebody free by buying a house and renting it out and all of that if you just met them yesterday. I mean, that speaks to me of an ongoing relationship and a goal that both people were committed to and working for. So that was one thing. Now, Colin, you happen to know that I have written a lengthy poem that takes on the voice of the child that Eliza raised. You know, the whole deal was she was here until the child was 7 years old. So basically, she was the mother to this child. The master's wife was sickly, and so Eliza took care of the master's wife and took care of this child from birth to age 7. I did some research on the child, who later in life married into French nobility. And I kept thinking, well, isn't that something? Isn't that something? Wonder if she ever thought about, you know, this semi-mother that she had. So there is that poem. I think that poem is in her voice, and it also is so far removed from the events of Eliza's escape, her freedom, that I don't think it belongs in this particular chapbook. But I am looking for, I guess I got some thoughts about how the chapbook could be enlarged and might go following other threads that are, you know, have not been followed. So something like that.
Thanks, awesome.
Okay, thank you, thank you. You helped me find that, actually, yeah, so.
To the author, do you have any thoughts on the judge and his position before, during, and after?
Well, I'll tell you a thing. I can find out so much about the white people involved.
Oh, yes.
All you have to do is flip a page and you can find out everything about them.
Yep.
And try to find out who Eliza's mother was. Can't find a thing. I thought, well, this is going to be her book. Somebody else can look up all the white people. I am going to stick with Eliza's voice. Yeah, because it's accessible. You can find it. You can.
That's how I learned her story, was talking about Vanderbilt.
Yes.
And you're right. You're spot on.
Well, it was, you know, my individual choice. And if I did a larger book, it might be interesting to follow some of the other threads, because she didn't manage to do this by herself. You know, she did a lot of the escaping by herself, but then when she got here, she found, oh Lord, I'm gonna have the name thing. Gray was the last name. Anybody know that story? Well, there was a Black woman living here, and she and her husband were embedded in the community. She was a seamstress.
Oh, that was Emily Gray.
Emily Gray is what I'm trying to say, yeah. And they put her in touch with abolitionists. So there were people helping. But Emily Gray has her own memoir. I mean, even from, you know, 1860, she left a record that is available today. But Eliza left these 3 pages. That's what she left. And so, so that's kind of the answer. I mean, I had to defend this in the early stages. People would say, well, why aren't you writing about? Well, I'm not doing it. That's what I'm not. I'm focusing on this, all right? Yeah, so, okay. I'm telling all my secrets now. I see things lighting up. It feels to me like we're winding down.
Yeah.
I love it that you've stayed this long. I really appreciate it and all the questions. I love talking about it, and I love talking about finding her. It was, you know, it was at a kind of rough time. I was trying to turn onto some different paths in my life, and I thought you just have to see some different people and go some different places. Go to the African American Museum, okay? It's raining, but you're gonna go there today. And then this happened, you know, and I thought, you said you wanted something different to happen, and okay, go with it. Here it is, it's given to you. So there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Eastside
Thank you.
Library. Thank all of you for coming. I'm just thrilled with you. Okay.
So I just want to especially thank my colleague Clarence White for playing the role of producer this evening, and things have gone pretty smooth. Thank you, Clarence. If you're not already receiving our twice-a-month electronic newsletter to find out what's going on here, I encourage you to go to the Eastside Freedom Library website, click on Get Involved, and click on mailing list and sign up for our newsletter. One of the things that we've discovered in this period of the pandemic and adapting to Zoom is that more people will watch a video of an event after it has happened than will show up live. And so we have an archive of videos of previous conversations, including a great one with Carolyn Holbrook around her new book. So if you go to our website, click on media, and that will take you to our YouTube page, and you can watch videos of previous events. It's really great to be able to have people talking to each other across great expanses. I think Marcus gets the prize tonight, Mary, for having come the greatest distance.
Great. I hope you're still on. That's great.
Yeah, but it's great. So we hope to see more of you. And also, if you have ideas for books that you think we should discuss, authors you think we should reach out to, issues you think we should tackle, reach out to Clarence, reach out to me, let us know what you would like us to do. We want to bring the ideas forward that people in the community are wrestling with themselves. So, and again, Mary, thank you so much, and Siddiqa and Allison, thank you. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Stay safe, stay well, make sure you get vaccinated, right? And one of these days we'll all be in person with each other.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So great.